Welcome. Sit down, roll up, pour up, turn up and tune in, because you're now watching the Buncher Bull Network.
What up? What up? What up? Welcome to the world's dopest podcast, the Marley State of Mind podcast, down here at the Bunch of Bull Studios, as per usual, how we do it every Saturday. And tonight, we got a special guest in the building with me. This one's a little bit different. I usually like to kick it off by saying how I was introduced or how I found the artist or creative that I have on the program. This one, I couldn't even tell you how I met you or the first time seeing you. Because I know you for my whole entire life. It's my big brother Oz. What up? How you feeling?
What's going on, man? What's going on? How you doing today?
Hey man, I'm lovely. It's funny because I like whenever I say my brother Oz, people are like, oh, we always say people are our brothers, but you're actually my DNA brother. So this one a little bit different, right?
Yeah, true indeed. True indeed. Yeah, I knew you before you knew you.
Yeah, truth, right? Do you remember it? Do you remember the first time you see me?
Yeah, you was a stomach at first. And
A belly.
yeah. And Pops was trying to explain, like, yeah, this is your brother coming. I was like, I don't get it. I didn't understand.
Right.
And then you popped up like a pop-up.
And here we are now. Look at it.
Yep.
Yeah, man. So, in addition to being my brother, you're also an amazing, dope producer, and even more amazing MC.
Appreciate it.
And, and we definitely want to get into that journey of your introduction into hip hop. For you, what was the first time you heard music, or what was the first record or time you heard music and you were like, yo, I want to be in hip hop. I want to be a performer. I want to be an artist. Was there a certain song or a record that did it for you?
Yeah, I can honestly say that the first time I really wanted to do it was I was listening to Redman. And that was what really sparked it off for me. I remember some key moments with key MCs that I listened to, like Nas. I remember the first time I heard, the Roots or the Fugees and stuff. And I was into the music, into the art form. Pops used to play a lot of different records. He had a vast record collection, and he would play a lot of different styles of music. He loved all different kinds. He was a big fan of Biz Markie. And so I remember hearing Biz Markie records growing up from my pops and stuff like that. And I remember hearing Dana Dane. He liked Dana Dane too, as far as hip hop goes. A lot of the old school joints. But for me, it was Redman, and specifically because he was from where I was from, and he just had like the most amazing like punchlines and metaphors and all of that stuff. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that. His style was so intricate that it made me want to pick up a pen and try to see if I could come up with something like that.
So you was always into the technique of hip hop. That
Yeah.
fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah, it was mostly the bars, intricacies of like writing to me. I always thought that stuff was fascinating, right? Like how you can say something and it means a thing, but you can look at it another way and it means something totally different.
Right.
That was always the driver for me. So a lot of my songs have that baked into it. I like to always try to make it not as obvious, right? I won't point it out, but I'll give you an example on my on the intro to my album Omega Man. I said it's overcomplicated. Let me tone it down a bit. I shove a kitchen surface in these fakes because they counterfeit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, what a kitchen surface is, counter, so on and so forth. Like
Right.
stuff like that always interested me, and so I always
counterfeit money or counterfeit things being fake.
Right.
It's a
Right.
lot of double
Exactly.
entendres, triple entendres there. Right.
And I shove a kitchen surface inside of you so the counter fits.
Right.
So, it's a lot of that. If you go back, you listen to my music, you listen to my catalog, every song has those elements in it. You got to listen to it 3 or 4 times and you go, oh, okay, he said that. You know,
And a lot of that's influenced from what you grew up on or what you gravitated towards in your music.
absolutely, absolutely. I always like the MCs that can do that well. Like I said, your Redmans, your Cannabises, Eminem, Chino XL. Name an artist that can do that well, and that's probably what's on my playlist.
Okay. All right. Now, do you recall like the first time that you made music or you made an original like composition?
Like, you mean as far as writing or like recording?
Writing.
All right, I do. It was kind of funny. I could tell you exactly where I was. I'll give you the exact address and almost the exact date. I was 10. I was in Irvington, New Jersey, at 1317 Clinton Avenue. I was in the bathroom. I had a pad, and I was like, writing this rhyme, and I didn't know what to write about, so I just wrote about being who I was,
Yeah.
and I was 10. I didn't have a great vocabulary, but I had the dictionary with me. I was looking at words, and I was writing it out, writing my rhyme out and stuff like that. Um, that was where I was, and that's what I was doing. And that was like the first time like I tried to like actually put a song together.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
inspired you to do that in that moment?
Just I used to like poetry.
Okay.
So I used to write poems.
Hmm.
I read a lot of poetry and stuff like that too, man, like Shakespeare and Geoffrey Chaucer and
Even at that age?
you
Even at
name it, man. Yeah, yeah.
wow. Okay.
So when I was into all of that kind of stuff, I would write poems. I would write very simple poems that would have in rhyme. Sometimes iambic pentameter, and I would use other elements of poetic license and stuff like that in order to like put poems together. But I never uh, I never really tried to put poems to music until then. And when I was, doing it at that moment, I was like, okay, let me see, what if I put a poem to like a tune? And then yeah, that's kind of sparked it off for me. And then from there, I just started trying to really like see if I could like how intricate can I put these things together and make them into something.
Yeah, hell
So
yeah. And at this time, you
that
said
was
you weren't really doing it to beats, or were you finding different beats to do it to?
my fault. I couldn't hear you.
No, yes, it's all good. I said at that time, were you doing it to beats, or were you just doing it a cappella, or how were you finding your beats? At that, especially at that
So
age, right? Because you don't know how to get a hold of producers or anything like that. You
nope,
don't really know how to make beats. I'd imagine not at that age. So how, like, what were you
nope.
doing as far as the instrumentals and stuff go?
So fun fact, I don't know if I could share this. This might be a trade secret. You taught me how to make beats, so I learned how to make beats from you. That's a whole other story right there.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into
And
it.
then
Yeah.
that's when I got into being a producer. But yeah, you're right. I didn't know how to make any beats or anything like that. So I would listen to other records, and try to like go off of the beats that they had, or I would just write them a cappella. I started off writing a cappella. I didn't really understand timing and all of that stuff. And
Right.
so my bars, I would have like super long and then super short bars, and it wouldn't have any rhythm to it or anything
No
like
real
that.
structure.
And as your boy said in the song, my first rap was like 48 bars and no hook.
Yeah.
So it was just like that. I was writing. I didn't understand like a concept of like 16s, and then slowly as I started to like digest hip hop, because there's a time when you just listen to music. I think there's every artist kind of probably has this evolution where you just listen to music, and then you appreciate it afterward,
Yeah.
and then you start to digest it. Right? It's like when you eat something, right? You taste it first, right? And then you
Hmm.
chew it up, and then when you swallow it, you digest it, right? It's the same
Hmm.
thing for music as an artist. And when I started really digesting hip hop, I started understanding, okay, there's syncopation, and there's rhythm, and
That's a
there's
good
timing.
metaphor. That's a good
Yeah,
metaphor for it. That's a good way to explain it. The analogy of saying it's like eating, because that's very
yeah,
true.
yeah. I do this. I do
Yeah, for sure.
this. No, but no, but really, as I really started digesting and understanding, like, okay, so there's certain structure to it, right? And then there's time, and I started to pick up on like, okay, a 4 count is a bar, and then you start doing things to that structure, and then once you learn the rules, then you can break the rules, right?
Hmm.
That's when the digestion turns into energy, right? You turn it to energy, now you can like manipulate that energy to do what you want to do with it.
Right.
So
No, hell yeah. So you're making songs now. You're doing acapella joints. Now,
mm,
when did you first make your first song? When did you record your first song? And tell us about that process for you of making your first song.
let's see. The first time I recorded, um, I used I had a little stereo system. It was a little cheap stereo system. I don't even remember what it was called, but it had a microphone jack in it, and I used a speaker as a mic. So I'll plug the speaker into the microphone jack, and I'll record into the speaker using it as a mic to record my voice. And I remember trying it out and realizing, wait, I can record my voice on here if I do this,
Yeah.
and it worked. And then I had it was an old joint, so it had like two cassette tape things, right? One
Yep.
where you could like dub a cassette,
While you
um,
play the other cassette.
right?
Yeah.
And if you record it while you're dubbing the cassette, it will capture your voice while you dub the cassette. So at first I was like quasi like DJing, right? Like how like your DJ clues or something like that to introduce the next song and just say a whole bunch of whatever taglines or whatever until the next song came in. Then
Yeah.
I was like, well, hell, I got these, I got this music and everything like that. And I could just record something to it. So I recorded like, I don't even remember what the first song was I recorded to it, but I realized it could be done. So that was the first time I like recorded any like audio of myself and like listened to it. And it was terrible, man. It was bad. It was, it was not good. I look back at those times and, I think Common said, flashbacks to past raps made me so glad I made it, you know, and so that was kind of my experience with that. And fast forward to you know um, I remember when I was in high school, uh, recording music and stuff like that, because where I went to high school at, we used to battle. That was a thing to do every day. Every day we would battle rap, right? And you came to school understanding like you're gonna battle today. You're gonna get in a cipher and
Yep.
you're gonna battle.
Yeah.
And that's the way all of my stuff was all battle bars. And I geared myself towards that uh until forever, right? So I would battle at school every day, before school, then after school, and then come home and then write and then try to record myself. And then it was like, rinse and repeat every single day.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that time's very interesting too because the high school you went to uh was a well known to produce a lot of artists, a lot of famous artists,
a lot
right?
of, lot of famous musicians came from that school.
Yeah.
You can go down the list, man. It's like, and the funny thing was, I heard Danger Mouse. I went to the same high school as Danger Mouse, and Danger Mouse said in the interview one time, he said our school didn't have a music program,
Right.
right? Which was weird because we had so many musicians,
Yeah.
right? Lala Vasquez, or Lala Anthony, I guess, went to the school.
Yeah.
Swiss Beats. What I'm saying, I went to school with
Jagged Edge.
Jagged Edge. You know what I'm saying. Lil Zane's brother went to the school. He was right
Saha
across from
Saha
me.
the Prince.
So I had a Prince. My homie used to mess with his sister. Like the list goes on and on and on. So yeah, it was interesting, and those people. I mean, those are the people that were around while we were doing the battling every day. Like, I'm sure, like, if I think hard enough back, I would have seen some of those people like in the ciphers, because it was just like that, you
Right.
know. And it was all love though too. That was the thing about it, is we did our thing, but everybody came together for the love of hip hop,
Right.
and that was it was a time where it was pure like that. Nobody had no problems with each other or anything like that. We talked trash because that's what you do, but we were there for the same reasons. We all loved the art form, the genre, the music, and all that stuff.
And it was an interesting time too, right? Because it was like a lot of cultural exchange because the school had a lot of kids
Mhm.
that were from New York
Yeah.
City or the East Coast somewhere, and a lot of kids that were born and raised in Atlanta.
Yep.
Because Atlanta was becoming such a melting pot at the time, as it still is. It's
Yep.
black Hollywood now, but this was kind of at the beginning stages of all that.
Yep.
So
It
you
was
had a
just
lot of
getting on.
people migrating to the area from different areas, and it was interesting to see that culture exchange through hip hop.
Yep.
because a lot of times they would have like north south battles, right? They would
Yep.
have
Civil
different
War
things.
battles, we said. Civil War,
Yeah,
that's what we used to
yeah.
say, because of the North versus the South.
South, yeah, and it was cool to see the different styles, and it was like you said, it was something that you had to prepare yourself for, and it kind of
Hmm.
it sharpens your sword, and it definitely gives you a certain edge of arrogance in a way that knowing like, yeah, I'm prepared for anything in the hip hop arena. Like, there's nothing that's going to take me out of my element because I've done so much of this day in and day out. You know, the whole 10,000 hours to an expert
Yep.
thing.
Yeah, and we used to have to be able to freestyle off the top too. Like you couldn't come into the battle with no writtens, right? Or people will call you out like, nah, that's written, that's written. Nah, you can't do that.
Yeah, yep.
So you used to have to be real sharp. So if you couldn't freestyle off the top, like you get called out real quick. Get ostracized from the group, as it were. And like you said, it was an interesting time. So we didn't really discuss this, but by the time I was in high school, I was in Atlanta. So I had gone from Jersey to Atlanta.
Right.
And then, like I said, it was an interesting time because you had to have bars. A lot of the cats that were doing it down there were listening to like, Ludacris and Outkast
Cass,
and all
yeah.
those guys, like lyrical Southern dudes.
Right.
And being from the north, like, we were like, nah, you can't come in here with none of that, crunk, nothing, shawty, whatever. Like, you had to come in like with lines. And so a lot of them, understanding that, like, it was a really interesting cultural exchange, because they stepped their bars up, and then we had to step our bars up, because like, now we from from the home of this thing, like
Yeah, we're
from the
from the
birthplace.
Mecca.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so we gotta, like, we can't, like, come in second to these cats. So it really pushed everybody. A lot of us that were in that circle went on to, what I'm saying, do big things with it too. So
Yeah, for
shout
sure.
out to them, man. Shout out to like Mike Drumwell and all those guys.
Yeah, man, for sure. All right, so you're making songs. You said you record music at that time as well.
Yeah, I first started recording music. First song I recorded was a song with an artist. That was a homie of mine, Rob Linton, and he started actually, like, he was the first one I saw that was like really grinding, and like, he brought me to the studio and stuff like that, and had me jump on the track with him. And once again, it was my first time like recording in any kind of professional setting. And it was awkward. I think, I don't know, man. If you are able to jump on the track your first time recording and really kill it, then you're really gifted as an artist.
Yeah.
I wasn't as gifted on my first go around, or at least I didn't like it. And I think that's an interesting thing about being an artist as well, is that you're probably gonna do a lot of writing and creating of things that maybe you don't like as much. And I certainly didn't like my first recordings, as far as that went. um, and it really made me go back and, like, reassess and retry. I had to do some soul searching, like, man, maybe this isn't for me, because I talked a lot of trash because I was from the battle side. And
Right.
you find out a lot of people who are good at battling aren't
It doesn't
necessarily
always
good at recording.
translate.
It doesn't
Right.
translate. It's two
Right.
different languages. It's two different parts of the brain, two different languages, two different everything. Because when I was coming up, like I said, I went to school with Lil Zane's younger brother, and I said really reckless things, like, about this dude, because he was signed. I didn't really
Yeah.
have nothing against him, but he was signed and I was unsigned and I was broke, and I was like, all right, so you gonna be the target, on like when, like, KRS-One, when he went at uh, MC Shan. It's like, yeah, you're at a certain position. I think I deserve to be at that plateau. I'm gonna go ahead and call you out like that. I didn't know. I knew I was good at battling. I was catching body after body. But like I said, when it came to recording at that level, I had a lot of work to do. So that's when I started to, like, really dig in and start to put the work together. So I ended up with this group in Atlanta called the Prophets of Sound. Shout out to them. I was probably about 18 when I joined up with these guys. They were all older than me, like either like 5 to 10 or more years older than I was. So they were, in it, they were doing it. And that was my first time getting a chance to, like, record with, like, a group of people who I could, like, really sharpen my sword with. And
Yeah.
so I was able to really, get some really good tracks. The first track I recorded that I really liked was from one of my favorite producers, homie of mine, DJ Connect. He's actually on the new Wonderland on a song called The Wonder. But he produced the first track that I liked that I recorded. It was called The Seven Scrolls, and everything about it, like I felt like I came into my own like right then. I was like where I was like
What do you
I
think?
was in my comfort place.
What do you think changed during that time from your early recordings to that moment? What brought you to the point where you like, yeah, this is where you found your sound?
Yeah. I think I just matured, you know. Like I realized that what I was doing from the battle stuff, all of that, you know, I didn't want to be that anymore. I didn't want everything was negative, you know. When you're a battle rapper, it's all like, you know, I'm talking about your mom, I'm talking about what you got, you know, I'm shooting you in the head, I'm doing all of this stuff. And I started really getting into different kinds of music. So I started listening to more like, you know, Most Def and Quali and Common and a lot of underground stuff, right? I was listening to like Chaos and Merce and Atmosphere and like, you know, some I got exposed to different kinds of hip hop that I hadn't heard before. And it rang to me that like, you don't have to just be a product of your environment. You don't have to be, you know, uh,
You don't have to take the negative stereotypes of the
yeah,
ghetto.
yeah, you don't have to bring that with you. You can actually use this as a force for good and positivity
Right.
and all of that stuff too, and creativity and fun. And sometimes you can still let the darker side out when it needs be. So that's what kind of changed, and that's what I was able to kind of embody. I think in that first recording, that really made me go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So, and after that was like things changed in a really interesting way, because right after that, I ended up meeting a group that was pretty influential back in the day. I was introduced by a guy named Dario to some of the members of the Outlaws, and so I started like I was in
Oh, very
Decatur
dope.
at
You
the
talk
time.
about Tupac's group, the Outlaws.
Yeah, yeah. So I was in Decatur at the time. If you know much about Pac actually lived in Decatur.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived in Decatur at the time, and Dario's from the Bay, and he was like, you know, he was super Bay. So this is what we gonna do, cuz man, I want to introduce you to my homies out there. You know what I mean? And yeah, whoop, whoop, whoop. He would say whoop, whoop, whoop all the time. Yeah, whoop, whoop, whoop. You know, we gonna put you down, man. We gonna be at the studio down in Decatur, man. We gonna put you out there. So I was like, all right. So I remember going out to the studio. I went to the two. He took me to the Tupac Center. We used to have a Tupac Center in Atlanta on Memorial Drive, and I went there, and he introduced me to like Afeni Shakur and all of that stuff, and so I got to see the Tupac Center. I got to walk around and saw like the little dance studio and stuff like that they had. It was all the art stuff, and then I got to go out to the back and saw like the bronze statue. We used to have a bronze statue of Tupac as a old man with like a preacher collar and a Bible and stuff, and so you know, that was like kind of like a turning point too. It was like, wow, okay, you know, like it was kind of like seeing a piece of the history of the whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so so after that, man, I remember like later on that night, I got to the studio, and I'm in there with like with you know some of the members of the Outlaws, which is crazy too because they're also from Jersey. A lot of
From
them from
Jersey,
Jersey.
yeah.
Yeah, so they were recording like a mixtape, and so I'm just sitting there kind of like taking in the vibes and stuff like that. And they're like, "All right, we need another verse," and they look at me like, "You got a verse?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, let me go in there," you know. And so I'm in there. I'm like, you know,
It had to feel like you made it at that point, right? Like the
in a sense, yeah, because like I'm in a room with people who like recorded with Pop, you know,
Mhm.
and you know, and they're asking me to jump on a song for like a mixtape, and I only did like one verse, maybe two verses, you know, while I was there. Um, and I remember the first one I had to like finish it off because I had some bars, so I was gonna be finish it off. And so I'm writing about stuff I don't know, like I'm hearing them say, right? They're talking about like scrapers and like all of this stuff, and so I'm like, all right, I'm feeling compelled to like try to throw some Bay in there, while you know not knowing nothing about the Bay, but I'm surrounded by these guys and they're doing this, so I'm like adding some of these elements to my verse. So I recorded the verse with them, and you know, on my way out, one of them is like, you know, it's like, yeah, man, I really like what you did in there, so on and so forth, man. Where you from? Having a conversation with him, and he's like, yeah, man, that's dope, man. You know, let's stay in touch. You know, unfortunately, I didn't. You know, once again, I'm like 18, probably about 19 at this time, and you know, I don't really have a lot of good follow up and follow through. You know, that's another skill you learn, I think, as you get a little older in life.
right. Yeah, no, that like I said, there had to be a time, especially in the moment where you felt like, yeah, I made it. This is that's where you want to be, right? That's where like especially when you're doing music, like I don't know for sure, but I'd imagine you didn't have any aspirations on being like on MTV. You were doing it because you enjoyed doing it.
Yeah,
But when this thing happens by chance, I have to feel like, yeah, I'm a step closer to getting on MTV. I'm a step closer to getting on BT, on being that big stage. Is that fair to
yeah,
say?
yeah. I think anytime you're doing hip hop, what I'm saying, or you're part of the culture of hip hop, and you're whatever you are in it. If you're a MC, if you're a DJ, if you're a graph writer, or whatever the case may be, there's always a drive to want to be the best at your craft. That's the nature of it, right? The nature of hip hop is give yourself to be the best, right? And so whenever you have those glimmers or those moments, like they stand out to you because it's like, okay, maybe I'm almost there, right? Like how close are you to the destination that you think that you're going to get to? But we never really ask ourselves is, what is that destination, right? Like
Right,
what is it? Like, how do you know once you got there, right?
right. You and I,
You
you
and
and
I
I
were
had
actually,
that conversation.
yeah, yeah, we were having that conversation. Yeah,
Yeah,
like what is it? Like, what is that destination?
right.
You might say it's fame, right? How do you know when you became famous, right?
Hmm.
How do you know, like, when you are famous? Who is famous, right? That becomes like a interesting question. I remember Redman saying that he was bagging groceries at the grocery store. He had songs on the radio, and somebody
Yeah,
asked him, "Aren't you the dude with the songs on the radio? Like, why are you bagging these groceries?" It's like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this." And that's when he like leaned into it. He had a deal and everything, and he was still bagging groceries.
Andre says that on the Me and You record, right?
hmm
I may
Absolutely,
have more fans than an average man, but he
yeah.
still,
But not
yeah,
enough loot to last me to the end of the week. I live by the beat, like you live check to check.
check, yeah,
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like you don't really know necessarily once you. I don't know if you know once you made it to that plateau. I know some artists, some famous artists that I got that are homies of mine. I won't call them out just because I don't know. But I got homies of mine that are I consider famous artists that have sold platinum records and so on and so forth. And when I talk to them, they don't seem like they recognize that's them, because they're just people. Like you're just a person. So I don't think you really feel different unless you may feel entitled in a certain moment.
right.
So
And like you said, there's glimmers of those moments, right? There's certain things that take place that make you feel like you're in that space, or you'll be in that space. And then, there's just highs and lows of being an artist, especially as an independent artist, where it's really
mhm,
hard to gauge what success is and what success looks like. But to
mhm.
to stay on track, what you were doing at that time, you just did music with the Outlaws. You had to feel like I'm much closer than where I was doing music. So for you after
Mhm.
that, did that motivate you to keep going? Did that give you more motivation? Did that give you validation? Like, yeah, I'm on the right track. Let me continue on this path.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, like I said, I was still doing stuff with the Prophets of Sound. We would record, and then we were like putting tracks together and then putting them out. At that time, you just like record a track, you put it online, like on your SoundCloud or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Just to get it out there, to get streamed, to get people to hear it. Right. One of the hardest things to do, and I think any artist will tell you this, man, like right in the beginning, is just to get people to listen to your music, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because especially in hip hop, it feels like everybody's making a song, everybody's doing some music, right? So you just are trying to get people to hear what you're making. So we started getting some ears, right? We're in Atlanta, and Atlanta is like becoming the mecca that it is right now during that
Black
time. And I
Hollywood.
guess
Yeah.
I guess it really kind of was at the time. And so we're in the right place to make something happen. And so we got a feeler from a dude who was working with Dame Dash. And so I remember we got invited to this mansion and stuff like that. It's not going where I think it's going. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. But we got invited to this mansion. Um, we, uh, we met with these dudes and we listened to our music, and this guy was a producer, right? So he's like, playing our stuff, and then he's like adding other little elements to it and stuff like that. And it was terrible. I didn't really like what he was adding to it, but we were like, yeah, yeah, that sounds good. It was five of us, right, in the group. And so me and the homie Brett, who goes by Unbeknownst, were like the primary MCs. Like I said, DJ Connect also, like, will come through with vocals and stuff like that. He mostly produced though. um, our boy McCavity, he basically would kind of add some singing and some reggae flair to it.
Were
and
you
then
were you
Savage.
doing production as well?
I wasn't doing production at the time, actually, and actually, this is a good segue into why I got into doing production. But just kind of finishing this off,
Yeah, for sure.
we we're talking to this dude. He's like, yeah, I'm working with Dame. Dame's getting ready to do his own imprint and stuff like that, so on and so forth. And so part of me is thinking like, okay, maybe this is it. Like you said, like you get that little glimmer, and it's like, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so they're talking to us like, yeah, we want to bring the group on, Prophets of Sound, all 5 of y'all, be so on and so forth, right? And then I never told the rest of the group this, so maybe they'll see this and this will be a thing, right? But I remember we all kind of dispersed after the meeting, and I'm over there like on the balcony, and I'm looking out, and I'm thinking, I'm having these thoughts like, man, this is it. Like this is going to be the thing that changes everything, right? I was living in Decatur in an apartment, 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood called Oak Tree. And if anybody on here knows about Oak Tree in Decatur back in the day, it was dangerous. That's where the bodies were found, right? Every week there would be a body found, like it's just like clockwork. And so I'm like thinking like, okay, this is going to be it. This is going to be what changes my circumstances, gets me out of this situation, and so on and so forth. And so I remember this dude walks out. His name is Alex, right? And he's like, "Hey, everything good?" I'm like, "Yeah, man. I was, it's a good meeting. I'm just excited, like I'm glad y'all feeling the music and so on and so forth." And he's like, "Yeah, man." He said, "Yeah, we think you're really good." And he's like, "We've been talking about it, man. We don't really need the rest of the guys. We could just use you." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, it's 5 of y'all. We don't really need all 5. We could just take you and throw you into it." And I was like, nah. I was like, well, I said, unbeknownst as the other MC, and we got production. Like I don't know how to produce or anything like that. And he's like, that's fine. We got producers. We could just pick you up. You got the look, you got the sound and stuff like that. We could just put you on. And I was like, yo, well, let me think about it. And we kind of left it at that. But after everything wraps up, I'm in the car. The homie Marshall, he goes by Savage. He was driving and stuff like that, and they were all talking about like, oh man, this is gonna be great, man. We're gonna get signed, woo, woo, woo. And I tell him, I was like, I don't think we should do it. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I don't think we should do it. I don't think we should go with him. I didn't tell him why. I just told him like I didn't think so. And so I think they kind of, I don't know if they harbored hard feelings about it, but I kind of put the kibosh on it a little bit because I didn't want to call out like, the situation that happened. It was awkward. It was an awkward
Right.
situation. I didn't really feel comfortable with it. So I just told him I didn't think we should, move
Pursue it any
forward with the
further.
deal or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they called them and, told them, hey man, we're not going to really pursue it and so on and so forth. And so we just kind of let that go. After that kind of like killed the steam of the group a little bit. And so I'm still writing, and I got beats. That like the homie like DJ Connect sent and the homie Savage sent. And so I'm writing to those. But every time I'm like, yo, I want to record something, they're like, nah, I didn't have any recording equipment. They're like, nah, I'm busy. I got other things to do. Like I said, they were all older than me, man. So they had real life. They had kids. They had like situations and stuff like that. I'm 19. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to rhyme. I'm writing all the time. When especially when you first start, like it's like a floodgate. Like everything just starts pouring out. You got bars, 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 bars.
Yeah.
So, it kind of came to a stalemate. So then I started recording with the homie DJ Connect. I said, hey man, the rest of the group's not going to do it. What if we just, start putting stuff together? So he was like, cool, let's do it. So we set up a meeting every week. We would get together, just him and I, and he would just like, throw on beats he had, and we would record them. And we started like bringing it to the rest of the group. And I think that kind of like got them a little bit more motivated because they were like, okay, y'all are actually doing stuff, And sometimes it takes that, like, if you in a group, if you're an artist, you're part of a group, or if you're in a circumstance at all, sometimes you got to be the one with like the fervor and the fire to just get everybody else moving. Like
Keep it moving. Yeah.
if you can get the ball rolling, then it's easier for it to keep
To
rolling.
continue
It's just
moving. Yeah.
fighting that initial inertia. But and that was cool for a minute. And then like I remember so while we were going, there were some other artists that he was working with and stuff like that. And I guess he felt like they were nicer than I was. And so he would like have beats and he was like, oh, you like that? yeah, I got that one for Shark. You know what I'm saying? Shark's gonna jump on it. I'm like, what about me though? I like what about my beats, you know?
Yeah.
And so everybody, you know, they had beats for everybody. Nobody had beats for me. So I was like, man, I gotta figure out how to make some beats. And that's when I started making beats. So that's my segue into it.
Yeah. So now, when you started making beats, like what did you start off with? What was your program of choice?
Man, Fruity Loops. It was Fruity Loops at the time. It was before it was FL Studio.
Okay.
Uh, I I found a very old version of it, and I started just like figuring out how to make stuff. And at first, if anybody's familiar with the Fruity Loops interface, it's all dots, right? You know, you just, you know, here's your hits and your kicks and your snares and so on and so forth. And I just started like messing with the regular sounds and stuff like that. And it took me a minute to like just
Like
keep
the stock
messing with it.
sounds.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
the stock sounds, you know. And then it took me a while, but then I figured out, okay, this is how you can sample. I can grab samples, and I started grabbing samples and stuff like that. And then so I didn't really know what I was doing, but I'm like, all right, I need beats, and I understand like, you know, rhythm and syncopation. So I started like putting stuff together, and at least it has some kind of rhythm to it. I set up my, you know, my setup on my DAW. DAW is a digital audio workstation for anybody who's not familiar with like production, sound, logic, and all that. But I set up my DAW all wrong. You know, I didn't know how to like structure out the sounds. I did it all incorrectly, but the sound came out. So, you know, one of my favorite people that I met is Ninth Wonder, and Ninth Wonder once said, like, you know, he said, "Hey man, you do whatever way you want to, man, as long as you make the sound come out." You know, and but the sound came out, so I was able to do that. And you know, like my first beats were like, they were very rudimentary. You know, the structure was all you know, all bad, but I knew how to make okay, this is a verse, this is a chorus, verse, chorus, and then I had beats to work with.
Yeah.
So and it wasn't because I thought I was good at making beats, because I had, you know, any aspirations of being a good producer or anything like that. I just needed
It was
beats,
purely out of
and
necessity.
it was out of necessity, 100% out of necessity. People wouldn't provide me beats. I was broke. I couldn't afford beats. So I'm like, I'm gonna just make beats, or else I'm done with the music.
Right.
So I made beats.
Now, at that time when you're making the beats for yourself, do you remember the first track that you recorded that you produced yourself fully?
Um, the first track I recorded that I produced for myself fully, that would have came a lot later. So I actually did a video for this, and it was a song called "Listen."
Okay.
And I sampled I think it was the Marvelettes that I sampled. It's a girl group from like in the 1960s. Uh, and there's a part of the song where she says, "What do you do when someone hurts you so bad, makes you cry, makes you sad?" And then she says, "Well, give me your hand, and I'll make you understand. Listen, baby." And I took that and I chopped it up. And
That was your first song that you recorded and produced yourself?
that was my first song that I'll say that I liked, that I recorded and produced myself.
That's
Prior
crazy.
to that, prior to that, like the other songs I recorded and produced, I was like, I don't really like them too much, right? So,
Yeah.
but the first one I was like, I think this is good, was that, and that was the first one like I put out that I recorded and produced myself. The other ones that I had, and I was like, they kind of got shelved. I got a lot of recordings, but I'm super critical of my own stuff. So if I
Yeah.
feel like it's just not good enough, you know, they kind of stay in the vault. I got a ton of throwaways.
And you said you made this was a track by you called "Listen," and you said you recorded a video for it as well.
Yep, I recorded a video for it. Shot by a guy named Matt Hannon. Shout out to Matt Hannon. I think he actually went on to do like Conan O'Brien or something at the time. But yeah, like you know, he was doing like film, and you know, I told him, man, I need a video. He was like, I need to practice, and so it kind of just came together, right? I was working on my first release of my own, which is supposed to be an album called Able Danger. And so I recorded all of these. I really got into the production and started really making beats that I thought were actually pretty good beats. And I was making beats that other people were like, "Yo, let me get a beat." And I was like, "Okay, you actually want me to produce a beat for you?" And people were like, "Yeah." So it was like different artists, like there's an artist in Portland, like that a friend of mine knew, named Twisted Insane. And he was like, "Yo, I'm going to send some of your beats to Twisted Insane." And there was different artists that were like, you know, in different places that, you know, I'm like, I'm making beats for and stuff like that. I might even recorded some beats for Marley, if I'm not mistaken, around that time as well. And so I'm actually like, my beats people are actually wanting now, and that was the first time that happened. That was unexpected. Like I said, for me, making beats was just necessity because I wanted beats, and then now I'm making beats, and people are like, "Yo, let me actually get my hand on some of these beats." And so I record the whole album of Able Danger, and it's all samples. It's all samples. And it was probably my most ambitious project in that way. I listened to a lot of one of my favorite producers, like I said, is Ninth Wonder, and so I studied a lot of Ninth Wonder's work, his technique, how he chopped his samples, how he laid his drums, and all that stuff. And I tried to like make all my stuff sound like Ninth Wonder
You tried to
beats.
mimic that sound a little bit.
Absolutely, 110,000%. If you listen to any of my Able Danger tracks, it sounds like I'm fake Ninth Wonder on every track. That was what
Yeah,
I
I
was,
feel
and that's what I was going for. I was like, how does Ninth do that? Like, how does he? Okay, oh, so okay, that's a bar, and then he cuts right here. Okay, that's where his cuts go. Like I studied it like I'm reading a book, like I was going in for a test.
yeah, what they
And
call that deconstructing it.
yeah, I was deconstructing and interpolating what so it was his sound, and I was like, I really liked it because he just made so much of like my favorite stuff at the time. I was really into like Merce. Merce had like a 316 album, was produced by Ninth Wonder,
Yeah, I was listening to that
and
recently. It's very
yeah,
good. Yeah,
crazy
yeah.
album. And so like I really wanted to have a sound something like that. And like I really like what Merce was doing. I really like what Ninth Wonder was doing. I was like, I
Do you
want
feel like
my
you
thing to
do you
sound like this.
do you feel like you executed it with that project?
To some extent, probably too much in some ways. So I recorded the whole album, and I recorded it all at home. I bought mics. I had studio. I bought like studio soundproofing, soundproofed like a storage room in my apartment at the time. Stayed up all night doing it, um, and then I recorded this whole album, and I listened to it, and it just didn't sound good enough, right? Like it sounded right, but it just didn't sound like the way I wanted it to sound in my mind. And so I ended up like holding on to that whole project. So I still have that project just kind of like that I held on to. So I did videos for it. I released
You
some of the tracks,
you
but
shelved
I did,
yourself.
yeah, I shelved myself, man. I'm a pretty demanding record producer in that way.
Yeah,
I'm like, nah, I don't like it. It's not good enough. Try it again.
yeah. Now that first project, you said you did do some videos for and some releases. What
Yep.
what were the name of those? Those we already named. Listen, was there another
Mhm.
one, or were there other records that came from that were released?
Yeah, I did another video in a song called The Arc. Um, I did a video for that. And I had another song called Dope, which is the first song I actually got like I sent out for copyrighted. It's copyrighted through like the U.S. government, through like the Library of Congress and all of this stuff. I sent it out, so I still got the paperwork for that. It's actually right over there. Um, and so that's when I was like, all right, I need to make this into a craft. So I branded my label, Artifact Entertainment. I got all my paperwork. Like I said, I started sending my music in to actually get it like copyrighted through the government and all of that stuff. And then I started to, the process of publishing, and I started putting out these songs, which was a really interesting time too, because now I'm in a place where, I'm putting my songs online. People are actually hearing them, and I'm getting feedback from them. So I started getting calls by different people, and getting hit up by different people that I was just like surprised to hear from. One of the first people that hit me up in the industry was this is gonna be rough. There was a guy named Raheem Brown. Now,
Okay.
if anybody's familiar with Raheem Brown, he was a rapper in the 90s, in the 80s actually. I think he first dropped in the 80s by the name of Tame One, and he was from a group called the Artifacts. Um, and he was one of the first people that hit me up. And like, so I'm born in Newark, right? So I had a picture online of myself. I got a NJ hat, and I got a Ron Muhammad tee. If you're from Newark, like the Ron Muhammad white tees. It says Newark on it. On the back, it says Brick City. And so I'm online with all my NJ stuff, and I name my company Art of Fact Entertainment, ARTOFFACT. I get it, I send it through the government, it clears and everything like that. I got my paperwork, and I get hit up by this guy from a group called the Artifacts, right, like artifact, like an ancient artifact.
Right.
And he's from Jersey too, and he's like, "Yo, who the hell do you think you are? I'm Artifact. You can't call yourself Artifact." And I was like, "I've never heard of you before, honestly, and I don't really like what you're saying. I find it disrespectful." And so we had like a exchange, and it was a little yeah, it got a little
A little intense.
a little tense.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was an interesting time because now people are actually seeing what I'm doing. They're listening to my stuff. I got a couple of videos out, and now
Was that one of the
uh,
moments like you felt the glimmer again, like you felt recharged, you felt like you were catching traction?
a little bit because now like I got I didn't know who he was, honestly. Like at first I had no idea. I was like, who the hell is Raheem Brown? And then I find out like that he's this dude Tame One, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't really mean anything to me. Like I'm young. I don't know who this guy is. He's got songs from like the 80s or whatever. And then I go back and I'm listening to some of my favorite rappers. Like I listened to Redman on one of his songs. He said, I just love smoking, blacking out like Tame in the open. Of course, I got the raw dog. No need to stick your nose in. I'm like, yo, he's talking about Tame One. Or like I listen to Lauryn Hill and she says, I get red like a snapper, tame like the rapper. I'm like, damn, okay, all right. So like this is not just some dude from some group that was popular in the 80s or something like that. Like he's got a little weight behind him. Okay, that's like that might be this might be an actual problem.
Yeah.
I got cousins and stuff that was in the hood in Jersey at the time, so I was like, I know I'm good if I when I go back and whatever, but it was still like one of those things. I was like, it was an uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, for sure.
But to your point, like people were listening, people were paying attention, and that ball started rolling, and that's when I first got like my first call from like someone in the industry that was like, "Hey, we want you to do something for the industry."
Yeah, that's what's up, man. So you're doing the music, you're releasing the singles, you're getting traction. And while we're on it, and while I'm thinking about it, how can the people get a hold of you if they want to follow you, they want to follow your journey, they want to listen to some of the music, they want to producers want to send you beat artists want to collab. What's the best way for them to do that?
No doubt, yeah. I mean, so on all social media, my name is Art of Fact Oz, ARTOFFACT AHS, Artifact Oz, AHS, and it's Oz too. It's not AHS. A lot of people used to call me AHS at first, but
Yeah.
it's Oz, like the Wizard of Oz is spelled AHS. Um,
What
or you can
about
hit me up.
what about streaming? What's the best way to stream you if they want to listen to some of the music you got?
I got some music on Spotify. I had some legal troubles with Spotify recently, behind some stuff with some legal troubles with Spotify. Let's just call it that. But I got music on Spotify. I'm about to re-release my third album on there again, which is a new Wonderland. But yeah, look for Oz on your favorite streaming service, Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you like to stream music. Check out Oz AHS, and you'll probably find me there.
All right, for sure. So you're doing the stuff now. You released the first record. You got the singles going out, but you
Mhm.
shelf it. You don't release that one.
Mhm.
What followed that? What was the follow up to that? And did you release that project?
Yeah, so I followed it up with an album called Omega Man, and it was inspired by there's a book called I Am Legend. It was actually made into a movie by like with Will Smith and all of that stuff. But prior to that film, there was I want to say it was Charlton Heston film called The Omega Man, and so in that film, it's about like this guy. He's like the last, basically human on Earth, and he's trying to like save the world from the zombie virus, right? It's like everybody's kind of like the Walking Dead, and he's like, I gotta come up with something to save the world. And to me, I was like, man, like I want to create that thing that wakes people up, that gets people to not, follow the trends and everything else that they see. How can I break through the zombie virus? Was like my idea going into it, and so I put together this album, Omega Man, with that concept in mind. And so a lot of the production of it, and even like the little spaces in between songs, have themes. It's all kind of thematic in that way, to from that Omega Man concept. And so yeah, so I kept it tight. I made it like 10 tracks. There's also a hidden bonus track. I feel like it's been long enough where I can talk about that. There's a hidden bonus track on there. I always wanted to have an album with a hidden bonus track for
Yeah.
whatever reason. It was I always felt like it would be cool to like have a hidden track on your album. So it's really 11 tracks on the album. Um, like I said, I was a big fan of Cannabis at the time, and still, Cannabis I think is one of my favorite rappers, just for the stuff he was doing like lyrically. When he was like coming out, was like it was insane. I listened to him for like years, even after like it was not fashionable to do so anymore. Um, and so like one of my favorite things he did was he did 100 bars track. And I remember he said in the song, he said, "A legion of half decent MCs will be released when they spit 100 bars for their freedom." And so I was like, I want to do that. So I did a song called Ozymandias, named after Ramses II, from ancient Egyptian lore, Ozymandias, and Ozymandias was called the God King. And so I did 100 bar track on that album called Ozymandias, but spelled with AHS, Ozymandias. So that was my like first like major release. And I should mention, by this time I'm actually in Portland when I put that out, and I'm actually fairly new to Portland, and it was crazy how Portland responded to a hip hop album like from a relatively unknown person into the city. I got all kind of love, from dropping that, and I went from doing, like open mics to like people being like, "Hey, we want you to like come out here and perform and like do shows."
Right. Right. So you dropped this project, Omega Man project, and
Mm,
while you're living in Portland, you're a relative newcomer to the city,
mm,
and the city kind of welcomes you in as part of their own, through this project. Then you said it kind of opened some doors for you at the same time, for as to where the locals got to know you, and instead of just doing open mics, you're actually doing shows there now.
mm.
How did that come about? Doing the shows, like how did they get a hold of the music? Was it just, were you making records at the time? Were you making actual physical copies, and like how were they getting a hold of your music? Was it
Yeah,
on
yeah, it
was
was
it
crazy.
online?
Yeah. So I tried to get my music everywhere. There was a place in downtown Portland called Everyday Music. So I remember I went down there. I printed a bunch of copies of my album. I had $1,000. And one of my songs I said, the budget for Omega Man was only by the grand. I made it back on the block, moving copies hand to hand. So you don't understand. Let me tell you how it works. I never peddled crack, but I used to sell shirts and bootleg DVDs from the school to the church, and I had to make it up from the stool to the perch. Like all of that's true, right? So I had $1,000. I had $1,000 to put towards this, and I invested that into this album, Omega Man. I got it on streaming services. I did printed copies of my album, and I would just go down the block and I would hand out my album to, what I'm saying, whoever I can get it to. And then I remember like just like I said, going to Everyday Music and getting a consignment situation going on with them, where I was like, "Hey, here's these, selling for $10, give me half." And they were like, "All right, cool." And so I would go there and drop my albums off for consignment, and I had it online, and I would just post it up everywhere I could online to get people like to gravitate toward the music and stuff like that. And then finally, it started to work, and so I started to get a little buzz going in the city, and then
Did you do
I
all the
started getting
product? Did
calls.
you do all the production for this project as well?
Yeah, so one of the things that I learned about myself through my making of music is that anytime I'm working on a song, I feel the most comfortable when I have something to do with the production of the song, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just don't, if I could just be doing the recording of it, like engineering it, because I like to engineer myself too. If I'm mixing it, like I'll mix myself, and so I'm good with that. Or I'm doing like the beats, right? So that was a what I had to do in order to it became like one of those things where at first it was for necessity, and then I found out I actually kind of like doing it this way.
Yeah.
I don't really like doing it any other kind of way. I make, exceptions and stuff like that, if I'm doing features for other artists and stuff like that. But
Right.
it becomes more difficult to collaborate with other people's visions of, what it should sound like, when you're just used to doing everything, the whole thing yourself.
Right.
So yeah, I did everything on that album myself, right? From the sound, song structure, to the mixing, to the mastering, for what it's worth. And I listen to it now and I'm like, man, the mixing and mastering is lacking. It's missing some elements. But I didn't have a formal education and background in any of that stuff. I just had the passion, the drive to do it, and the understanding of this sounds good, this doesn't sound good.
Right.
And
A lot of trial
so
and error.
yeah, a lot of it, a lot of trial and error. Um, so I did all of that stuff myself. Every part of those albums, if you go back and listen to them, that's all me. Like every part of all of that stuff was me at that time, making those things come together.
Very dope. Now you said the reception of it was good. Were you dropping videos for that project as well?
I had $1,000. I didn't have anything to put videos to any of that stuff. But what was interesting was that, off of the strength of it, I started to kind of rise up the ranks, within the city. And then I started getting calls. Like, I got called from different labels and stuff, for people who were like interested in, like, trying to, put me on deals and stuff like that. I started getting calls about, like, from people who were like representing artists, who were like, yo, we want you to be on this tour with this artist and stuff like that. And that's when I started to, like, get like artist gigs and stuff like that. And so I was on, different tours for different, hip hop artists, and different tributes and stuff like that. And it was crazy because it was like one week I'm doing open mics, and then like the next week I'm on somebody's tour, which was like,
Who were
it
some
was
of the artists you were? Who were some of the artists you got a chance to collaborate with or do shows for?
So there was like I mentioned, Ninth Wonder. So Ninth Wonder and Rhapsody, which was really cool. Like, Ninth Wonder was a really cool individual to meet. I got to listen to unreleased Ninth Wonder beats. And he was like, hey, man, you like, Ninth Wonder's a country dude. He's from like South Carolina, and he's got a very like South Carolina accent. So he's like, hey, man, you like that one? I made this one last night. I'm gonna put this one on right here. Check this out. And so he's like, playing different records and stuff like that, and talking about like what he sampled, like different Bobby Womack and stuff like that. And so I got to kick it with Ninth, and like, listen to, a lot of his stuff, when I performed with him in Rhapsody. And then Pharoah Monch, Jay Electronica, Royce the 5'9", Wu Tang. That was crazy. Some of my favorite memories during that time was like, getting to perform and work with Wu Tang. I remember when I met Ghostface, I thought he was making fun of me. It was kind of an interesting story. Because I had my little business card, and, saying, when I first met Ghostface, and I was like, hey man, I was like, yeah, this is me, this is what I do, and I'm getting ready to perform, and I'm performing right before he does. And so I'm like, yeah, and he's like, all right, yeah, that's what's up. That's what's up. You know what I'm saying? I really like this. Okay. You kind of professional, right? I said, yeah, man, anything you need from, in the way of hip hop, man, I got you. He's like, yeah, man. He said, you got beat stew? I was like, beat stew? He's like, yeah, beat stew? I was like, you asked me if I make beats too? He's like, nah, yo, beats too? I was like, oh, do I make beats too? Yes, I make beats too as well. I do make beats. And
Yeah.
he was like, all right, cool. And so he gave me his email and stuff like that. He was like, yeah, send me some beats, and he was telling me he was producing the next Wu-Tang album. He's like, yeah, Richard told me I get to do the production for the next Wu-Tang album. And yeah, send me some beats, man. We'll see if we can get some of your beats on there. Um, but long story short, man, Ghostface, amazingly cool. You know what I'm saying? We got to rock out together and stuff like that. Probably one of my favorite artists that I got to interact with was Raekwon. Raekwon is like, we clicked immediately. It was like family. It was crazy. And every time he talked, I'm like, yo, eyes, yo, eyes, And so, everything I did with Raekwon, man, was real cool, man. You know what I'm saying? So he was one of my favorites to roll with. I
Yeah,
got to
those had to be special moments, right? Like meeting someone like Knife, and you said you crafted so much of your style of production from
mm,
someone like Knife. Getting to meet some of these
mm,
artists that you grew up listening to, that you admired. Like we always we spoke about on a couple times throughout this podcast about those glimmers, those moments of,
Mhm.
and that certainly had to be some of those moments, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, it's hard to really explain to people uh, unless you've been there, like what it's like to sit there at the top and kind of see, like, you know, it's like being at the top of the mountain. You know, the verse goes, "I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the glory." You know, I've been in these rooms, and you know, I've performed in front of like thousands of people who could have booed me and made me disappear and never come back again, and they never did. And you know, a lot of artists have experiences where they gotten booed off stage. I never experienced that. It seems like it'd be a heartbreaking thing, but you know, when you spend your time, you know, writing, like every bar I've spit, I wrote, you know, when you spend your time writing everything, and when you spend your time in your room producing these beats, and you spend your time recording this stuff and re-recording and saying, no, that's not good enough, throwing it away, and you come back and you try it again, and you put it out for the world. It's like I'm putting this out, I'm putting this part of myself out that I spent my time with. This is my life that I spent making this thing, and you put it out there for people to judge. And it's like exposing a part of yourself that's, you know, it's a piece of you. And if people go, that's trash, you know, it's like, ah, man, that's gut wrenching. But
Yeah,
when you do it and people like it and they gravitate to it and they see it and they can appreciate, you know, the art, and they understand you as an artist, man, it's like it's a fulfilling idea. So every time I stood on one of those stages and I got love from the crowd, you know, and I got, like, you know, the respect of my peers, and like I said, you know, being able to, you know, interact with like some of these guys, like, you know, all those people I just mentioned, you know, Currency and Graph even, which were, you know, really cool guys that I got to, you know, spend some good time with. Um, and them seeing, like, you know, I remember when I met Currency, he was like, yo, he said, can I get some of your music? And I thought it was incredible because you usually got to push your music on people.
yeah.
Currency was the first artist that was like, let me get some of your music. He requested it from me. And I was like, you know, like it just changes, you know what I'm saying, like your outlook on things. And you
Hmm.
know, we talk about like those glimmers of like those moments are the ones that to me kind of stand out, because it's a culmination of everything that you spent your time and energy and effort
It's
doing. It
your
validates it.
life. It's your life work. It validates all of your life work
Right,
in those
exactly,
moments. Yeah, for sure.
exactly.
So now you're doing a project. You dropped Omega Man. You're opening up for
Mm.
artists. You're making some waves. How do you follow that up? Like what was the time after that?
You don't, honestly. I mean, you know, you do. Like, there's it's one of those kind of things where it's like sink or swim. You know, it's you, I think at that point you try to get to your next levels. You know, it kind of goes
Right.
back to the conversation you and I were having about fame, right? Like, how do you know when you've gotten to what plateau? I think that I was at the point where I started to see things and people around me starting to change, right? It wasn't the point where you're making money off of it and like people are like, you're, you know, you're getting paid, and you know, you're all of this stuff, like all of that stuff is kind of changing, right? But I started seeing people change. People who I had known for some time reacted and responded to me differently, because now I'm, you know, I'm in the newspaper, or I'm on a show, I'm on, you know, I got videos out, or I'm on TV, or whatever the case may be. Like, those things started to change, and I'm in demand, you know, now, and stuff like that. And when you're doing all of it, like I was doing all of it, I didn't have anybody that was making beats for me. I was making my own beats. Although I had people reach out to me with beats, right? I had like KU on the track reach out to me. I had E Smitty, you know, who produced for like ASAP Ferg and Chino Excel. He hit me up and he was like, "Hey, let's do a project and release it through my label and stuff like that." You know, I had like you know, like different, like I said, record labels that hit me up and stuff like that. But you know, just out of an abundance of caution and kind of just not knowing how to navigate through this kind of minefield of, you know, what all of this entails and what it all means. Um, you know, it's really hard to know what the next steps are and how do you get to that next plateau. It's like when you're trying to climb a mountain, right? You know, if you're an experienced climber, you know, okay, now that I made it to this plateau, I put my hand here, my foot here, and I can make it this, and I can, you know, I can kind of climb up to the
You
summit,
know how to navigate it.
right? But if you like, I didn't have anybody, like I didn't have anybody that helped me through this. I didn't have any mentors or nobody in the game who was like, oh, let me show you how to do this, and this is how you
That already took all
negotiate
the
deals.
steps that knew how to get you there.
Right, right. So even though I had people who were reaching out to me, you know, had somebody hand me Warren G's phone number and stuff like that, like, yo, Warren is probably going to be interested in you, so on and so forth. And, you know, I got all these contacts from these people, but there was still a part of me that was like, well, I don't know how to now make it to the next level of this whole thing. I just know the stuff that I'm doing right here at this level. So I said, okay, well, let me make this the most I can make of this. And so I started doing features. I started doing features for different artists, you know, who were in Portland, and features for artists in Atlanta, and features for artists in Pittsburgh and stuff like that, you know. And I never charged anybody for a feature, you know what I mean? Um, but I'm doing features all over the place. And you know, and that became like my next move, you know, like, okay, let me see if I can expand this thing out far enough to hit the right chord and put myself in the right kind of position. Because I did have somebody reach out to me, and actually, you know about this. And they were, you know, I don't know if you remember the whole like, oh yeah, man, there's 10 million people trying to rap right now.
Yeah.
This guy. But you know, and I'm seeing different opportunities for deals, but I'm also really cautious and wary about like the whole concept of like 360 deals. And I remember what happened to, like, you know, people like your TLCs and like all these different groups of people who, you know, came out and they were huge, and then they just, you know, they made all this fame, make all this money, they don't get to keep any of it, you know. So I was really wary about that kind of stuff. So for me, a lot of it was just continue to do what I'm doing and seeing if I can make my own grind as much of it as I could make it.
Right. Right. Now, during that process, were you able to learn from those connections? Do you still collaborate, or are you still in contact with those artists that you were working with during that time?
I still got a lot of contact information from them. You know, I don't. I always feel like it's an interesting thing, right? When you know, and I think you kind of experience a lot of the same thing because I know you quite well. Uh, when you know people who are in positions, man, I always feel like it's kind of janky to be like, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And so on and so forth. I don't really like asking people for like favors or anything like that. And maybe that's the thing that you know, I should have navigated out of or gotten over. I feel like if I'm reaching out to you, I want to make sure it's me reaching out to you for a purpose, right? Hey, here's an opportunity, or hey, here's something that I can, you know, do that's going to enrich you and me as well, and you know, be a growth opportunity that's mutual, not just me trying to leech off of, you know, you, or trying to take, you know, from you so I can get me to the next place. It always kind of felt like a scummy thing to me. So I never I didn't really maximize these contacts as well as I should. And like I said, I still got people that I know that I'm good with and stuff like that, you know, that I could reach out to, you know, like you know, one of my favorites is it's actually Montel Jordan. I hit him up just for stuff sometimes, just like, hey, what's up, how's things going, you know what I'm saying? And you know, stuff like that, you know. But there's different levels of your familiarity too, you know.
Right.
So if I'm familiar with you from like from the music scene, and it's just us doing music
Just
together,
strictly music, yeah.
yeah, I'm only gonna reach out to you for music because that's the level that we at, you know.
That's where
Versus
your
like,
relationship is, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of like where I am with it.
I feel it. Now, so you dropped the old Mega Man, you get the
Mhm.
reception, you're doing the shows. What was the
Mhm.
follow up project, or did you have a follow up project after that one?
I did. I actually did an album called The New Wonderland. So you know, my name Oz, right? Advanced Human Speech. Altawan has styles, amazingly hot songs, and lyrically hostile. So obviously inspired by the book by L. Frank Baum back in the 1800s called The Wizard of Oz. Um, that story, the first time I heard somebody break it down, I was hanging out with some Freemasons, and and they were telling me like what the meaning was behind this whole thing, and how it was all like metaphorical, you know, and how it had all these pieces to it, and it
The
reminded
story
me so
the
much.
story of
Yeah,
Oz, like the Wizard of Oz and that.
yep,
Okay.
yep, and it reminded me so much of like hip hop in the sense that like you can have a thing, and it mean multiple different things, kind of
Means
like what we
more than
talked
one
about
thing.
on the top of this thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And so to me, like that was a hip hop story in that sense, right? And the artistry of it made it hip hop, and it's about this guy, this character Oz, who doesn't really have any powers. He's in a fantasy world with talking lions and living scarecrows and witches with actual powers and flying monkeys and all of these crazy things. And he takes over this world. He doesn't take over this world because he's the most powerful. He takes over this world because he's got a mic. He's got a mic and a soundboard. And he took over the whole world with a microphone and a soundboard. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, right? Like you could take over an entire world with people with real wicked witches with real powers and stuff like that, who can like transform and shoot fireballs and all kind of stuff. And all you got is a microphone. That's to me, that was heavy, right?
Yeah, you could win
So
you could hypothetically win a whole space war with just like a whole studio
mhm,
and just pretending like you've actually been somewhere and not even be there.
yeah, you could
Same
like
same concept.
yeah, like say for example, if just hypothetically, like if you were, a country and you have another country and that other country is like close to like going to like say for example the moon or something, right?
Right.
Then you could like if you have the gravitas and the equipment, you can actually make a movie about going to the moon that's so good that you could convince people that you went to the moon and you did more
Right.
than this other country actually did, and you did it for a fraction of the cost just by creating the illusion that you actually went to the moon. If a country were to do something like that,
Right.
for
So that's
example.
basically what you're saying Oz did. He gave off the illusion of power without
Mhm.
actually having the power.
Yeah, yeah,
Have just
and
having the
and
microphone, having the right equipment.
yeah, and like I said, me, being in that position where I'm in this one bedroom apartment in this terrible neighborhood, and people are shooting every night and getting killed and so on and so forth, and I'm like, yo, how can I, what can I write? How can I write myself out of this situation? Right? That's the inspiration behind all of that stuff. You know?
Manifestation, really.
Yeah, yeah. That's how you manifest destiny sometime, right? You say, hey, I belong here. That's manifest destiny in itself. I belong here. Why? Because God chose me to be here. And so now I'm gonna go ahead and be there, right? And I'm gonna show up like I belong.
Right.
So that's what I tried to do. And so my follow-up was A New Wonderland, which was actually another book by L. Frank Baum, the same guy that wrote The Wizard of Oz. Um, and it had the subtitle A New Wonderland: Tesseracts for Other Fourth Dimensional Squares. So for anybody who doesn't know, like, there's there's multiple, concept of multiple dimensions. A two-dimensional square-shaped object or a two-dimensional parallelogram where all the sides are equilaterals is called a square. And then you have a three-dimensional version of it is called a cube, and the fourth-dimensional version is called a tesseract. And always said, hey, so you could be a square, but why not be a fourth dimensional square? Why not take it to another level? So I call it tesseracts for other fourth dimensional squares.
Now,
So
what
that's the full
inspired
title.
what inspired that project?
Funny enough, man, I was listening to a lot of music that was coming out at the time, and I was like, I said, I got songs that I don't like that are better than these songs. And so I went back and revisited those songs, and I was like, let me go ahead and put this together.
Mm.
And so at this time, I'm still doing shows and stuff like that. And I got a band, I got a group that I'm working with now at this time. It's called the Eclectic Republic. Shout out to Eclectic Republic. So I got like a full band. I got a DJ on top of having a full band. And and I'm like, we're trying to put together a project too called League, or the League, and I had a song, to go with that. And so I said, well, let me take what I have and take what I want to have and put together a project to be my next follow up to this Omega Man project. And that's what I came up with. And it was an opportunity for me to break down a lot of other different things that I'm into, because as I'm growing, as I'm learning, I'm into reading, I'm into history, I'm really big on that kind of stuff. And so I was able to kind of capture a lot of that stuff and put it down into the music. So like I got a song where I said, let me break the history down. Europa was Phoenician, and the Phoenicians came from Canaan and later became the Grecians. Hermetic polytheists. So tell me, who do you believe in? Like, so I'm able to actually now put a lot of more of my character and myself into the bars. And that's what really was the inspiration to uh, New Wonderland.
Do you feel like that was another evolution of yourself? That project?
In a sense, it was, yeah. You know, I think each version, each project that I was working on, and I think it's probably true for most artists, it's a reflection of who you are in that moment of time. It's like a snapshot. It's like a picture. Um, it shows, hey, this is at this moment in my life, this is who I was. This is what I was thinking. This is what I was working on. The things I was ruminating on. So yeah, I think it was definitely that. A lot of the songs are a lot more introspective. It has a lot more to do with you know um, how I'm thinking at the time. I had a line in that song or in that album where I said, A&R said I need a club hit, but when I hit the club and perform, the folks love it. So I ain't ever change it for you. Go on, suck it. Whoever you decide to sign, they can't touch this. And that came from a real situation, where like I'm talking to A&Rs and they're like, yo, we need something that's gonna pop bottles and get people, shaking this and that in the club and so on and so forth. And I'm like, I don't want to do that, like to me that just it's poison to my people, and I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be the guy that's poisoning my folks with this kind of logic and rhetoric, and I want to do something better than that.
What up, Bobby?
And that's what changed that for me.
Yeah, hell yeah. No, I like that, and I think that's a fair statement to say that every artist, a good metaphor too. Every artist project is a snapshot of who they are during that time, right? And I like that you're taking us on that journey of the evolution of you and how you're thinking at that time with each project.
Mm.
How was the reception for that project?
It wasn't as boisterous as the previous ones. I think the biggest thing for me though was I had two opportunities that I missed. And it was opportunities to perform with artists from Chicago who I had a lot of respect for. Lupe Fiasco.
Mm,
He would come to Portland. He came to Portland twice. He did a Crystal Ballroom in Portland, and I was reached out to by his folks and by people who were handling his promotions and stuff like that. And there was some promoters I knew and I was familiar with, but it was really weird at the time because they kept asking me to do stuff that I just wasn't comfortable with. It was like they had different requests for me for some reason when I was working with Lupe than they had for anybody else. And I was like, it didn't feel right.
right.
And so I remember turning it down. And then it wasn't until about a day before the show where they came to me and they were like, look, man, we played music for all these different artists for Lupe, and he didn't like these other artists. You were the only one that we played for him that he actually liked, and he said that he's very particular about who he shares the stage with. He said he would share the stage with you, but nobody else. So they said they brought all these different artists for him, and he was like, "Nah, this is whack. This is trash. This is garbage." And mine was the only one that they liked, and so that's why they wanted to, they had like all these different requirements and different contracts and I had to sign these different things and stuff like that. And I was like, man, if y'all would have told me that in the first place, it would have changed my response in the
Right.
circumstance.
Yeah, for
But I
sure.
realized the reason why they didn't tell me that was because if I'm the only one he wants to work with,
Then
I
you can
can make
kind
some
of dictate
demands.
terms. Yeah, you can dictate
Yeah, I can
terms that
dictate
way.
some different terms, and
Yeah.
so but that's a rule, that 40/80 rule, that rule 4,080 in hip hop. Record company people are shady.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that was one of my experiences with that 40/80 rule.
For sure. All right. So you drop Wonderland. You do that. Now, is there a follow up to that? What do we get from after Wonderland?
So I haven't dropped the follow up to that yet, but I'm actually working on something right now.
Okay.
Um, and so I'm gonna just give you the letters. It's SPH. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Dope.
Is going to be the follow up to a new Wonderland. And it's got some stuff I'm pretty excited about on it. I think in order for the music to be good, you got to be in the right headspace.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I did a lot of features and stuff like that for a lot of different artists. But this is going to be the first one where it's just me kind of getting back to fundamentals and really digging into a different part of myself. So if you're watching, if you're interested, if you're looking, my next joint is going to be coming out here really soon.
Very dope.
That's SPH.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Now you said this is another part of you. This is something else that you're digging into. Uh,
Mm.
from this project, is there like are you Is there like a single that you're looking to bring out? Is there like a date that we can look for any singles or anything like that?
Not yet. I'm taking a different kind of approach to this project.
Okay.
And so like I want I'm not my plan is to not put anything out until the project is complete.
Okay.
I want it to be a whole picture, right? So
Right.
in the interim, I might do songs. I'm actually working on a kind of a non sequitur song right now with some artists from Jersey and stuff like that. And I'm working on some other stuff in the meantime. I actually just did a song with a rapper called Two Dope Boys. I don't know if you heard about this song.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good song.
You can
I
talk
made the
about it.
beat. I made the beat to that song as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did the mixing and stuff like that, mixing and mastering on it. Um, got some new equipment, new technology, and stuff like that. So I'm pretty excited to really dig into that and really get the sound that I want. That's always been a challenge, is really getting the sound that I want out from what I'm working on. And so now I feel like I have the skills, the technology, etc., to make that happen.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, with this new one, I'm not going to put anything out from this project until the project is wholly done, and then I'm going to unleash it on the world and watch what happens.
Yeah, it seems like all of your projects you're really intentional with, right? Like all of the themes, you're really intentional with everything that you do with the music. You're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall, if you will. You're not just spraying and laying. You're
Mm.
really direct and precise with your shots, right? And it sounds like this project is more the same, where you're going to be, you have a concept in mind, you know exactly how you want to approach it. Were you always like this with music, like even from the early days? Because you said even like the Able Danger, you were kind of like that. Was this always
Mm.
your approach to music, or was this something that just came later on as you were doing it, being so intentional with each sound, with each song, with each album?
Yeah, I always wrote and rewrote. In every bar, every one of my bars is like that. I'll take a bar and I'll rewrite it until it becomes what I want it to be.
Mm,
And that's why I say, like, if you go back and listen to any of my material, it's really dense material. Every line has some interpretation that you can apply to it. Um, and I remember listening to Atmosphere and him saying something like that, like, where he said, like, you know, he said every paragraph needed a translation attached to it. They saw the style, they respected the craft, but all it did was confuse them and try to get them to laugh. Um, and it's kind of that same thing, because like I said, to me, that was what made hip hop worth listening to, is, can
the
you
different
can you
intricacies.
yeah, can you take something from it and come back later and then listen to it again and take something else from it again
Mm,
and
hmm.
come back later? Can you keep being fed by the same bread, right?
Right.
Can you continue to come to the stream and continue to be, have your thirst quenched, listen to it when you're this age and hear something, and then come back and 10 years, 20 years later listen to it and be like, yo, I just realized that this was about this thing,
Right. Yeah.
so that me and my girlfriend track from Tupac is one of my favorite Tupac songs because of that reason. Like, you listen to it at one level and you're like, oh, he's talking about him and his girlfriend, and
Yeah.
then you go back and like, wait, he's talking about a gun the whole time. Wait a second,
Hmm.
and then it leads to that replay value when you start to pick up different stuff that you didn't really pick up the first time. And that's always been my intention behind the music, is to create something that has that kind of value to it,
That
where
kind
you
of
listen to it.
substance.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's all sustenance. It's all sustenance, which is why, like I said, when I'm approached by a label and A&R from the label is like, yo, we need something that's going to crack in the club and sell bottles and get people smoking and get girls twerking and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm not doing it. Like, I can do it. You know, I'm not doing it though. Like, it's not something I aspire to do at all.
Right. It's not a part of your mission in hip hop.
Right. I have too much respect for the craft, too much respect for the art form and the culture and the people. I studied the artists that came before me. The KRSs and the Cool G raps. One of my most proud moments, and this is probably going to sound silly because I'm pretty sure this wasn't him, but on my Twitter, not Twitter, on Instagram, I had a message from Cool Herc. who put something on one of my things. He was like, "This is cool" or something like that. This is a guy that like is the godfather of hip
Father
hop,
of hip hop,
the
yeah.
creator. Yeah, So having his attention on anything that I did was like incredible. And then like getting people like Curtis Blow, who like connected me on like on LinkedIn, and started following my stuff, and you know um, uh, you Shock G when followed me on Twitter, and MC Ren.
Some of the founding fathers of hip hop, some of the people
Yeah,
that really
yeah,
pioneered hip hop, if you will.
yeah. Like when at one point my Twitter, I remember when my Twitter hit 50,000 followers, and I'm starting to see like people who like to me are just like remote, like famous people, and now they're looking at what I'm writing down or what I'm typing or whatever like that, and having commentary about myself, and it was like mind blowing to me. I couldn't fathom it.
Hmm.
So I wanted to continue on that path, and I wanted to really embody what I felt like was the purest form of that art without having to compromise it by living out somebody else's dream on some label somewhere who wanted to sell death to my community.
No, 100%, and that's respectable, and it's more respectable, right? And sometimes it's the whole is the squeeze worth the juice. Um,
Mm,
and that's something that you have to decide for yourself at some point in time in the hip hop. But most certainly, there's so much we can get into, especially when it comes to you and I and having these
mm,
conversations. But I think I'm gonna have to have you back so we can get into some of the other stuff that we do want to talk about. But it was a great
right.
introduction for those who are not familiar with you and what you've done thus far. And we're certainly going to be on the lookout for SPH and all the things you have coming up for that. Is there any shows or anything that we can look out for upcoming?
You know what? Like you said, have me back, man. By the time we reconvene, I'm gonna have a whole lot more for you. Absolutely.
100%. Appreciate you, man. I appreciate you joining me here on the world's dopest podcast, Marley State of Mind podcast, down here at a Bunch of Bull Studios. Um, thanks, brother. I love you, man. Thanks so much for
Absolutely,
doing
man.
this for me.
Likewise.
And we'll talk soon, of course. But for
Of course.
those of you, make sure y'all tune in with us down here at a Bunch of Bull Studios. We do Vision Talks 2 o'clock. We also have the Stash Spot for you 6 o'clock, and those are both on Fridays. Of course, I'll be back next week with another special guest for the Marley State of Mind podcast, the world dopest. We do it all the time. Uh, we just dropped the On It freestyle, right? On that bullshit freestyle featuring myself, my song Smoke. Make sure y'all stream that. Make sure y'all watch the video, the mic drop of that. You know what I mean? Until next time, we're out of here.